defeat your enemies, crush the rebellions, tear them apart and take everything from them. These are the words of the great conqueror, the doom of all creatures, and the calamity of Zebrica. He was nobody but a single yeti who struggled for his life in southern Zebrica. A thief, a slave, a knight, or a noble. His past was covered by the fog of history. Who was he? No critic can tell, as those who could were already perished by his order. Who was he? It did not matter, as he united yet he scattered clans with fire and steel, and now everyone would know who he was. He abandoned who he was and called himself the Storm King. He walked with the storms and acted like thunders, for anyone who dared to refuse would meet their death. The unification of the Yetis did not satisfy his ambitions though. The Storm King wanted more, he always wanted more, even if he had everything he needed. He began assembling a mighty fleet of airships to support his conquest. And in that age of swords and hammers in Zebrica, this air supremacy had become his greatest advantage in the later conquering. The Kingdom of Henia was the first victim of Storm King's invasion. Their homes were destroyed and temples were removed. Their corrupted forces were defeated and the rebellions crushed. Storm King had taken everything from them and nothing could be left. 2 years after the Dome of Henia, the Mazvi Empire in central Zebrica was also destroyed like an ant by the Storm invasion in 1002 ALB. Their dead bodies were thrown into the Great Lake. The water was stained red by those numerous rotten corpses and had been inhabited for decades since. Through the peninsula of Risaya, Storm King invaded the kingdom of Gaglau and Centuria 1003, turning their motherland into ashes. However, as his army kept marching, his forces stretched increasingly thin. Thus, Storm King had to separate his forces, letting some of his generals begin the eastern campaign and abandoning the invasion plans towards southeastern Zebrica, which was seen as a region without any value. The locals like Zeblus and Zonglus were overly militarized, and the Kyrians who locked themselves in silence were blocked by the mountainous terrain. The only precious that attracted the Storm King was the golden temple hidden in the forests, but he could not risk the chance of delaying his conquest to search for it. In the meantime, having seen horrible scenes left by the Storm King, Queen Nova of Hippogriphia chose to evacuate the people to Equestria ahead of the invasion. But the donkeys of Asturia and the Onsuruk didn't have the luck to avoid the fury of the storm. Their countries were looted and turned into ashes. But as the Storm King wished to further his conquest of the west, the intervention of Saudi Arabia interrupted his plans. The united forces of Saudi Arabia were the first one who proved the Storm King can be defeated. Having seen the fierce resistance of the Arabians, Storm King chose to march north through the Nile River, conquering and looting Egypt, Yemen and Abyssinia. Storm King enjoyed the moans of those who suffered because of him. The victory in the north had eluded his failure in the east. The well-decorated palace in Egypt was too shiny for him to see those flaws hidden in the corner. Instead of resting and recruiting, he immediately started the next stage of the conquest in 1005. Departing from Egypt, his Yeti army marched towards the coast of northern Zebrica. Tarantia, Zumedia and Kothad were destroyed for resisting. The only ones who survived were those warlords of Tobok. Fearing the mighty force of the conqueror, the warlords yielded the city to him for the chance of survival. The city of Tobok, once the jewel of the north, was modified into a logistics center, filled with all the firearms of the Yeti legions. In 1006, almost the entire continent had bowed to his crown, but he always wanted more and more. Storm King ignored those voices of the long-lasting conquest and prepared for his invasion against a country abroad, Equestria. However, as he was facing the hippogriffs in the Battle of Eindrugrit, those tiny flaws ignored in the past had become the deadly weak spots of his legions. His airship fleets were backstabbed by the Royal Air Force of Addis, and he was betrayed by his general, Tempest Shadow. His legion was scattered and his life was taken. The Battle of Eintrugrit, also the final battle of Storm King, had ended a nightmare over Zebrica's sky. As for now, everyone knows who he was, but not in a good way.